illustration video. This time I'm going to be using the early submissions for Project 1. The first one we have here is Carlos's illustration. Carlos, I think, done a really good job of setting up the characters and placing them within the composition. Great facial expression on the characters, both the uh, main character, which I assume is going to be the Dragon Knight, and the secondary character, which is the Knight, right over here. I also like the background. Like, it's pretty simple. I think that it works really well, and you can see the separation between the background and the characters because of how light it is compared to the characters in the foreground. One thing though is that the separation between the two characters, you can't really tell. One thing that you can do to find out whether or not your contrast or your values are really working is by simply squinting at your illustration. Just look at it, squint your eyes, and take a look at your shapes. If, let's say, the two characters don't seem to stand out on their own, then maybe we need to do something to to separate them and make them be their own entity. One thing you could do is to add more values, and just by looking at it, you can definitely place some more values here and there. Okay, let's zoom in really quickly at the characters here. As you can see with the characters, I think that Carlos has done a great job with adding the shadows, at least the ambient shadows, like inside the mouth and maybe underneath the arm here, to separate different overlapping forms. But everything feels sort of the same value. Like the value on the armor is the same as the skin. It's the same as the secondary character's armor, and the armor in the secondary character is the same as the cloth. So we need to add more various, variety. We need to add more variety in values. One thing we could do to do that is by simply using the blending mode method that we touched upon for a couple of videos now. So what I'm going to do is to add a brand new layer. Well, actually, before I do that, let me do something else. Let me unlock the document. Hopefully Carlos has these guys in separate layers. If not, this one works too. So unlock it, copy it, so you have the original illustration underneath. And let's head to Image, Adjustment, Levels. Again, we explored this earlier, but levels is basically allows you to mess with the contrast that you currently have. And according to the histogram here, there's a lot of the mid to lighter tones, not a lot of darkness, not a lot of highlights. So looking at the sliders in the bottom, you have the darkness, the mid-tone, and the highlights. We can move that around to kind of bump up which areas we need to bump up. So let me push the darkness slider up a little bit to add more value. Just overall darkness to everything, add more dark values. I'm going to take my mid-tone and put it down a little bit. So basically just mess around with it, and along the way just do the squint test. Squint at it, see if you're seeing more separation as you go. And just by bumping up the darkness, we're adding a little bit more of that value in there. And then press OK. So if we zoom out, let's take a look at both versions. Here's our edited version. Here's our unedited version. Now you can see a little bit of difference, so you can definitely push it even more. So from here, we can create a brand new document, set this one to multiply. Remember, multiply is one of the darken blend modes. And then let's just take our value. And click on the swatch, you get your color palette. And from here, let's choose between the ranges of black all the way to white and everything in between. So let's say I want the armor to be white on that character. So that means I have to darken the skin here. So let me take a mid-tone. Let me take my brush. I'll use my normal hard brush, a simple round. Make sure toggle is on, and I'll just start placing the values down. Paint it on. You can be careful with it if you'd like. Definitely spend more time on it than what I'm doing right now. My pen seems to be struggling, so let me see. Image size. Alright, let me lower the opacity real quick. I mean the sizing, so that my computer won't have such a hard time. Let me bump this up to like 120. Remember to start high with your resolution and then save low if you like. Sometimes in Photoshop, if you're saving or exporting as instead of save as, you're exporting for the internet, which means that you're having a larger size with a smaller resolution. It's okay for submission in class, but for your final illustration, and if you want to print, you want to save as save as a JPEG or save as a PNG instead of see how hard it is kind of working over time here. Might need to wait just a little bit for this one. Let me just cancel that for now. Apologies guys, I'm working with a really old computer here. It's basically my daily driver. See, sometimes it just does that. It's a glitch in Photoshop. So let me force quit, guys. I'm so sorry about that. Let me start all over again. That's why Command Save is a pretty good idea if you guys want to do stuff in Photoshop. Oh, good thing it kind of auto-saved it, which is really, really awesome. But yeah, sometimes that's something that you're going to have to come across sometimes when working with digital programs. You're pretty much a slave to whatever your computer or whatever your software is going to do. Alright, so let's go back to our brush. Choose the hard brush again. Opacity toggle on. And let's just paint it in. Now you could do this in different, make sure that's a gray. You could do it in different layers. You pretty much, I highly suggest you guys use different layers for you to do this. Because if you do it in different layers, it allows you to sort of manipulate it independently. You can lower the opacity on it. You can start a brand new layer on top, set it to multiply again, and then maybe add a secondary value on top. Lower the opacity on that again, so on and so forth, right? Just keep adding different values to things to make sure that they kind of stand out from each other. Take your time, keep squinting along the way. Like, even though Carlos placed a lot of cool shadows in there, it's still not creating as much separation as you need to, or you need to have. See, if you squint, the head stands out even more now than before. Excuse me. And then you can merge everything together and just continue painting on top. Like maybe the wings here could be a little darker as well. Just paint this one in. Lower the opacity. Let's say I want even darker, the little bone areas. So I'll set 1 to multiply again. And I'll continue. Adding a bunch of details into my illustration. Keep squinting, and you're good. So another thing that you could use that blend mode for is to add more shadows into it. Like according to this, it looks like it's a really, really bright day. So let's say the light source is coming from up here. It looks like it's coming from up there, or more likely it's coming from here, just based on where the shadows are, and it's sort of shining down. So using that multiply method that we used, you can start adding even more shadows in here to even add more contrast. Like especially down here where there's not a lot of sunlight hitting, makes that clear separation. Spend your time on it. There's really a lot of cool details here, especially when it comes to the drawing. So we just need to go in there and just make sure that each and every single one of them stand out. I say this over and over again, but please use references. Don't be shy about using those references. They will help you make your illustration look a little bit stronger, you know? So for example, on the armor, let me look up medieval armor. Let's take a look at, and let's pull some of the reference in there. You can pull from photos, or you can pull from various other things, like other people's illustrations as well. Here's a really cool one. Just drag it into your illustration. Command T for free transform, and just put it there. While you're working, you can use the crop tool, which is the 5th tool down here. You can extend it, your canvas, and then you can just have this over to the side while you're working your illustration. And I highly suggest just pull from a lot of different media, so you can get the best possible illustration that you can. And you can highlight them both holding down on Shift, Command G to turn it into put them in a folder, so you can have them there without messing with them later on. Alright, so let's go back to our layer, merge down. So now look at my references. I could definitely see that it does need a little bit more detail in there. And also, it also shows me how to basically, work around and add a little bit more highlights to make the armor really stand out and make it feel like metal. Because from here, everything's looking a little bit too flat because there's not a lot of texture there, no surface texture. Meaning everything has the same sheen, the same roughness. the same reflectability when it comes to the light source. So you need to make distinction between the armor and the scale of the skin. You can look up lizards or even paintings of dragons to see how you're going to go about doing the skin. And even for the background, if that's going to be like sand or just ground, then look up deserts and see what you can do to, sort of translate that into your own illustration. But for now, let's focus on the armor. So the armor definitely has a little bit more reflectability in it than the skin would. So we need to make that come across that way. So seeing that the light source is here, let's take a brand new layer, and in this layer, I'm just going opaque, normal layer, no blend mode to it. I'm going to take, let's say, pure white, and I'm just going to pinpoint where the shiniest parts are. For example, it's going to hit here. So you're going to have the light source coming down. So remember, this part is going to be really, really shiny because that's the armor. So the horn is probably going to be made out of, let's say, ivory. So it's not going to have as much shine as the armor is going to have. So maybe it's going to reflect a little bit of light, but it's not going to fully be as bright as that armor right over here. Look at your references, see how it hits the planes that are facing your light source. So in this module, you guys had to do the basic shapes. So you have to treat individual shapes like the basic shapes in order to find where the light source is going to hit. So for example, this shoulder armor here, it's basically like a sphere. So if we treat it like a sphere, if the light's going to hit, then the light's going to hit like this, and then it's going to go out, and the shadow is going to be on the opposite end, like this, like a sphere. So it's basically what we're doing here. So the light's going to hit here, and then the shadow in the opposite direction, away from that light source. And then for the arm, it's not really a sphere, it's more of a cylinder. So if it's a cylinder, it's like this, or rather, facing like this. Then the light's going to hit the top part more, and maybe reflect onto the side, and then everything else is going to be in shadow. So that's what we're doing here. So the light from the sky is going to hit here as well. It's not going to be as strong as the direct light to it. So it's going to create that lighting towards both sides of that cylinder. Just take a look at the armor that you have here on your references. Now, I don't expect you guys to go full super realistic, like having, the other character's reflection on the armor right over here. I don't want you guys to do that yet. I mean, eventually, you guys are probably going to get there. Most likely, you're going to get there. But for this assignment, just, I just want you guys to understand like the basics of how lighting is and how lighting a form is going to be. Here, luckily, we have like a really cool reference of a sword. So the sword is metal, so it does reflect a lot more light. So we're going to add some more of that highlight in there as well. Back here, that's also armor. Armor down here. So a little bit of light reflecting. Now the cloth is different now because it's not going to be as reflective as the armor. But I want to add more to it than just having it be the same. So I'm going to I'll decidedly add a darker value here, set it to multiply. The reason being is that I want the arm of the secondary character to stand out. So by you know, creative choice, just a executive creative choice, whatever you want to call it, I'll make the cloth down here darker to help frame the arm of your secondary character. Or else the arm just basically just gets lost there, and you don't want to do that. Since it's a separate layer, I can lower the opacity until I could get it to stand out more. And let me merge everything together. So now let's work on that secondary character. Now, sometimes it's kind of hard for us to work on a character that's upside down because we're so used to them being right side up. And since we're working digitally, unless you're working on like an iPad or something, you can't flip your Cintiq or your Intuos or your X-Pen or Huion, whatever you're working with. You cannot flip your target, the other way around. So another cool tool is the rotate tool. The rotate tool is just above the magnifying glass right over here. It's this tool right here. You can click on that, or you can hold down on R while you have your brush open. Hold it down, don't let go, and flip your canvas around. Basically, it's just like moving a piece of paper around so you can get to a better angle. And from here, you can zoom in, hold down on R again, and look at your illustration. We can continue painting. So hold down R will allow you to temporarily enact your rotation tool. So here's an armor. Now let's separate the arm from the cloth even more. Let's say it has a little bit of sheen. It's probably just a glove. And the armor here is going to reflect a lot of light again. And then the chest here is probably going to reflect even more light. Same with that. The hat or the helmet here. See, this is just basically a spear. So we're lighting it like a spear. So if you want to reset the view, hold down and head on over to the options bar of the rotation tool and reset view to go back to how it was before. I'm just adding, basically using the soft brush, I'm just adding a little bit of a glow to things. It's just basically a single layer using the soft brush, just adding just a little bit of glow. Again, I'm just using my references to see how any of these work. So it's just a little shines. I'm just using a soft brush. So now if you squint, you can kind of see the two characters start to separate a little bit more. So the further that you add various, various values in there, the better. So something as simple as this, basically a highlight towards the foot here, separates that foot from the wing even more. Alright, so Carlos, it's looking really, really good. I just want you to continue on and further develop your values. Push it just a little bit more. After you do that, push the rendering even more. Just simply go on top of it. Holding down on the options key, just maybe, push out some of that line art. As much as the line art is really cool, it will flatten your form. So maybe it's good to just kind of phase that off. But if for now you're not comfortable doing it, just go and make sure that you get to know the values and see how, to separate them and let them stand on their own. All right? All right, pretty good. All right, so next up we have Carla. Now, Carla looks very good as well. I think you're pretty much in the same, not same, but similar boat as Carlos, in that you need to push some of those values even more to have separation. Um, Although your illustration, if you squint at it, has a much more clear understanding of like the separations between the foreground, the middle ground, and the background, and even the shapes stand out a little bit stronger. One thing I would highly suggest is to not add. Hopefully, you have this on a separate layer, but not take this little light filtering away first. Like do that towards the very end. Right now, what you want to focus in on is the the shapes themselves and the blocking. So you pretty much had that though. Like you have blocking here, blocking for the face. But what I want you to focus in right now, after removing that little light, ambient light glow, is to work on blocking. And then after blocking is to render with light and shadow. Same thing here. Let me see what size the image is. Very, very large. So let me lower this. Let me see, 25 maybe. Oops, cancel. No! That says 255 inches. Photoshop, I tell you. Let me just redo this again. There you go. Image size. Again, you want to save as instead of export as PNG. So let me set this one to something smaller, 15. So right away, if it's constrained, it will change it according to the size that you set up the first one. And I'll turn this into 150 for now. There you go. Let's see if my pen works a little bit stronger. Yeah, okay. So blocking, render, light, and shadow. So again, going back to the basic shapes assignment, you sort of want to treat it that way. So we have our really cool looking face here. So we want to add and treat and break that face down into the individual shapes. So you have sphere, cylinder, cone, and you have the box, the cube. So if we break this down, eye socket sphere, you have a little bit of a cone happening here, a really cool looking muzzle, cone for the ears, and even the hair has like individual cones. And then the whole head is just a sphere. So if we break those down, it seems to be the light source coming from here. So a lot more shadow should be on the face, right? So let's break this down like this. Let's take the shadow, set it to multiply, and let's just add shadow all throughout the face here. So before we add in those special effects lighting, let's take care of like the basic lighting, like core shadows and form shadows. I mean, the character, the lighting is coming from the back, so most of the front should be in shadow, right? since you don't have like a main key light, like some kind of a lamp or a direct lighting, she's going to be in shadow. Even the couch is in shadow, but maybe do the couch on a separate layer, just for this part. So now let's lower the opacity. And then, since you blocked in that shape, we could use the eraser to sort of reveal the lighting. But for this one, let me introduce the layer mask. The layer mask is a little bit more complicated, but we'll get into it in another module. Basically allows you to create like I guess a constrained layer to it, or a masking layer right next to your main layer. And then instead of using the eraser, we're using the brush, using black to take away and white to bring back whatever is contained in your main layer. So basically, if you work with like watercolors, it's basically like the gum Arabic, or if you're masking something, so you want to keep it unpainted, it's the same sort of like, it's the same process. So basically, using black, I could take away whatever is found within this layer, go back to black, and using white will bring it back in. So you're not permanently deleting or erasing anything. You're sort of just making sure that you're allowed to make a mistake and fix it later on. So that's a really, really cool thing about it. And with that, you can use any brush that you like, unlike when you're using an eraser where you're basically stuck using the default brushes. You can use a custom brush if you like, which makes it a little bit cooler and gives you a little bit more, variety in terms of erasers. So using, and if you want like if you don't want like a totally erase it and you want transparency, same thing. You can use the values in between to create various degrees of transparency, or you can let the pen pressure do it. Like if I choose black and I lightly press it, then I could take away a little bit of of that shadow. If I go back to white and I press hard on it, I bring it back. So you can control it using pen pressure and opacity. Alright, so the light is coming from here, right? So now what we're going to do is to basically just thinking about all those various shapes. So if you're going to have, if this is going to be round, it's going to hit it round-wise like this. Same thing here, it's probably going to hit that muzzle. So this whole plane here, if you connect it together, they sort of just connect. The shoulder here is basically a sphere, so let's treat it like a sphere. And it connects to a cylindrical part here. And then we'll add more here. I tend to kind of use the hard shadow, the hard brush instead. Gives me more control, and then use the soft shadows later. You can kind of see the difference. Look how soft everything is using the soft brush. With a hard brush, I can make those planes clearer. Like here, I have way more control using that hard brush. To put the ear here. And then that light is probably going to go down here a little bit and maybe hit the leg up here. So if you're going to do this method, just go in there. Don't focus on one area right now. You just want to place where that lighting is going to hit. Like map it out. You can always go back in there and clean it up later. See if I turn it off, putting that shadow in there. Look how much richer it is already just by doing that. Now I'll use my soft brush to do a little bit of cleanup. I still want some of that hard brush in there, just to give it a little bit of texture. Remember, white will bring it back up. Bring your shadow or whatever you have in that layer back. Let's say, okay, I made that too much, so I could go back in there and bring that shadow back. So now you do that, then you move on to the couch, do that in a separate layer, add some shadow to it, and then use the light to carve it out. Same thing for, let's say, the window treatments. And again, use references. Like, for example, the window here is treated as like very opaque, but window treatments are usually sheer unless they're like sun blocking curtains, right? So let's say go to either Pinterest or Google Images and search for sun behind curtain. Perfect. I got so much references to pull from here. Let's see. I really like how this one looks. See the sheerness of that curtain compared to, let's say, the post, which is opaque. It's solid. There's no like holes to let the light in. So maybe we could introduce that same concept here. That's why I really want you guys to start thinking ahead. Think about all those different layers, right? So let's say, let me just block this one out. Let's start over here. Just erase this real quick. And let me just finish up this window. It's gonna have a window bar here. Alright, so it's gonna have that. So now I want to add that curtain back in. Instead of keeping it in the same drawing and the same line art, what maybe you could have done, or just thinking ahead, is to do it like this. Add the windowsill. Think about it in layers. Like, let's say I'm drawing that the window treatment. This. And then create a brand new layer on top of that. And that's when I'm going to, let's say, sketch out a curtain. I'm going to sketch out a curtain that's going to go down here. A curtain are basically half cylindrical things as they fold, right? So they're basically cylinders that are cut in half down the middle. So they're like this, and then this one swoops under, swoops out. They're basically like half pipes. So I have that sketch. I'll create a brand new layer on top of that. Oh, sorry guys, cats. Cats are stepping all over the place. And I'm going to take my black here. I'm going to start drawing it out. Keeping in mind it's just my layer here. And I'm going to render it like I would like my reference, and thinking about a cylinder where most of the shadow area here, where there's not direct light hitting it, will have most of the shadows. So lower the opacity here so I can see it better. That. Just by doing this, I'm already creating overlap, so you can see that crossbar behind that curtain. Use a soft brush if you'd like. So instead of like having it all in one layer and then drawing in that back behind it, put it transparent, like the way it appears as a curtain, like a transparent curtain, and put it behind that bar and let some of that bar peek through so that it looks more like there's a bunch of layers underneath it. I'm just using the eraser to, let's say, add some of that sheerness back in. And I can continue to draw. So stuff like that glow, that's something you can do at the very end. Because, you know, you don't want to like do everything and then find out you need to change something, then the glow is already there. Then you're just going to have to erase, spend all that time erasing that glow out of the way. So work in layers and use special effects, lighting and stuff like that towards the end. Alright, so now you can take that. We can take our soft brush here. Let's take white. On a brand new layer, let's say you're done rendering, adding in your core shadows, your form shadows, cleaning up all the line art. That's when we come in with that nice light to come in. And there you have it. So your color, just keep doing what you're doing. Pay attention to the form. Make sure the core shadows and cast shadows are in place. Maybe think about textures as well. Adding some kind of texture just so you can separate different surfaces. Going back to Carlos's illustration, think about like how shiny the cup is, or how shiny her blouse is compared to her fur. Even let's say you want a leather couch. That couch should be shinier than the character overall. So that's something you want to start thinking about moving forward through the next couple of days, and then at the end start adding in those really cool special effects. All right, cool, nice job. Next up, we have Sonia. So Sonia, I'm really glad that you chose the one where the lighting is coming from up front. I get that's a really good idea to showcase your character. I also like the idea that you're almost sort of looking up, right? I like the fact that we're looking up at the character instead of just looking straight forward and he's kind of tilted. So now there's like a really nice upshot angle of your character. I think that's a really good idea to do that. Rendering, I think, is starting to get there. I like the main lighting that you're doing. I, however, thought that maybe the lighting from the previous one, like the one we discussed in the value studies, I thought was a little bit stronger. Like especially if you put like some kind of a lighting here. But it's really up to you. If you can make it work, I say go for it. One thing that really stands out to me looking at your illustration is the way that everything kind of just ties in together, and also some details that maybe takes a lot more attention away from your main character. So for example, this one right here, I'm not sure what this is, but seeing as your character is very highly drawn, like it's done organically and you drew it, and this seems to be some kind of like a pattern, it really sticks out. It almost feels like it doesn't belong there. And also the fact that it's a pure circle makes the viewer go to it right away. It seems like your character has become secondary. So I would suggest taking this completely out. I don't think you need that one at all. I would revert back to one of your studies where it's complete, and then you got like the little octopus suckers here. I forgot, tentacles, and place it there. Another thing that I touched upon in a during your value studies is the fact that there's not a lot of human qualities to it. Uh, just think about Squidward from SpongeBob, how he has a shirt, you know, and he has like a almost like a the way he stands is very human-like, very upright. Like you need to introduce some kind of thing like that. Maybe have one of his tentacles hold a cup, or maybe he's reading something. Uh, there's a lot of opportunities to do that by simply going and filling this side. So maybe from underneath here, you can have one of the tentacles come in, and maybe like I'm not sure, like hold on to like uh, first off, what is your character doing? Where is he? Seems to be in like a forest. But let's say that maybe he is in the forest and at nighttime and he's doing something um, catching fireflies. So maybe he's holding like a bit of a jar with fireflies in there where there's a bunch of fireflies flying around here, right? And also that could be like a little bit of a light source here. And then the tentacles is gonna come up, maybe blocking him here. Maybe he's walking, so maybe just like one step, and then the one tentacle is holding like a jar or something. Maybe he's reading a book. Just have maybe one tentacle fill the space. This guy has like 8 arms, so utilize some of them, right? Maybe even have one just come out from under here, and maybe another one here. You're trying to fill the space as efficiently as possible, and seeing as your character has all these limbs that you can do so much things with, utilize them. Not just show like one tentacle out of the 8 of them. Maybe have one holding, like let's say you're going with a firefly idea, holding this. Maybe the other one's holding like a flashlight. Oh, no kitty, don't scratch the chair. But yeah, make your character really, really animated and give him a lot of human qualities. Again, one of the things I highly suggest is to go to the Pinterest page I posted at the beginning of the semester, or look up anthropomorphic octopus. Like, look what other artists have done and try to see what you can do to kind of incorporate it into your own illustration. So here's a really cool one. Just drag and drop your references towards the side. Again, references doesn't mean you have to copy them. You're just gaining some inspiration from them so that you can, find out what you can do with your own illustration. Here's another really cool reference here. This particular reference, I mean, a little too, not exactly what I want for my illustration, but let's see if we can drag it. But I really like the little spots on him. Maybe I could incorporate that into my own octopus. So I'll just pull this in here. So I could take cat, stop it. That, something like this. Let me take the value, and maybe you can start, adding some pattern and texture to him. Just to give him a little bit more personality, and also give him just a little something in there. Another thing I kind of want to address is, again, I kind of fit the whole Firefly story. based on the background. The background looks like he's in a forest, like maybe um, among tall grass. Um, but why is he there? Like, you gotta ask yourself a question: why is he there? What's he doing in the forest? If you meant this for this to be like an underwater world, then use references of something underwater so that you can incorporate that into the background. Um, I also kind of want to know why um, the background here is a lot lighter. I would probably go darker here. Like, keep it pretty dark. Like I said, I really like your previous study where it was like a really dark background because it's a nighttime setting. So let's just darken this out. And then you had that really cool moonlight. Maybe we could place that moonlight up here behind the trees or something. And that could be your secondary light source. And this your main light source is maybe in front of him, like maybe like another lamp or a torch. So another light here, since it's a dark background, will help you add rim lighting to your character to separate him from that dark background. So like that. Here and here as well. Or you could use the fireflies. Like, you don't really have to go with the fireflies idea. I'm just kind of putting it out there just to help connect that background with the main character. Maybe have those hypothetical fireflies sort of add light. So that you can separate the main character from that dark background. Alright, that's pretty much it. I don't want you to think that you have to, again, make it super perfect. I just want you to, moving forward for the next couple of days, sort of try to merge the two ideas together. Your background and your character, and also utilize the space as much as you can. Like, you have a really cool character to work with. He's an octopus with, I think, 8 limbs, right? 8 tentacles that you could use to your advantage in filling out that space, so that there's no like dead space towards the right side of the composition. He has a really good expression. I really like his eyes. Just make sure that, like I said, connect everything together and use as much references as you can to help bring your idea to life. All right, thank you very much, Sanya. And finally, for this set, we are working with Jonathan's illustration. Jonathan has a really cool looking illustration. I think that the placement of the shadows are really good. The lighting is coming from above. Really good looking details. I think that it's working really good. One thing that I would comment though is that maybe the shadows are a little too harsh, they are like pure black. Like right now, how harsh and dark those shadows are, if you squint your eyes, all you're seeing is light gray and those black blockins, the shadows, or the dark gray blockins. So what we want to do is to fill in the in-between parts. It's pretty much what we talked about with Carlos's illustration. We need to start adding in the different values, add variety to the amount of values in there. Because right now, even though there's a lot of shadows here and there, the fur of the mouse is very similar to, let's say, the poncho, or the I guess it's a cape or a shawl. It's very similar to that. It's very similar to the leaf of the plant. You can barely see the flower because it just kind of blends in with the background. So we need to do stuff to make sure there's separation there. The first thing that I would recommend is to do what I talked about in Carlos's illustration, and that's just adding in more values. Let me copy and paste this, add another layer, set it to multiply, and then take in some values and just making sure there's a clear separation, right? So let's say the leaf here. It's a little bit darker so that it stands out. Maybe even the flower is a little bit darker. Or better yet, make that flower even brighter. We can't do that in a multiply layer, so maybe on a separate layer, so it stands out a little bit more. But we'll get to that in a little bit, because I have another idea for that. For now, let's just block in our values. I just noticed this here. Is this supposed to be fire, Jonathan? If so, then that should be emitting light source as well. Or is that supposed to be water? So let us know so that we can address it later. But for now, we're just going to block in those various values. Like the ear here, maybe a little bit darker. And I'm going to add more values to, maybe the pants will be just a little bit darker as well. And then addressing the background, let's start a brand new layer, set to multiply. And, you know, add more variety to the values here too. Now if you squint your eyes, you can see little shapes starting to kind of, you know, come up. Let's say for the carpet, I'm going to have something different in there. Spend more time on what I'm doing with the carpet right now, but for the carpet, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a pattern too. Yeah, just spend more time on it. I'm kind of just breezing through it. See how much it already fills up the space and almost like makes him kind of just stick his foot down there instead of like almost floating in like that gray value space. So let me merge this together. Now you can kind of see the difference here. Just by adding a little bit of value in there, you're just producing more stuff and adding to it. Producing more contrast, I'm trying to say. Another thing that you want to do is to add more variety in terms of shadow. Like, for example, depending on your light source and how far it is, let's say your light source is up here, then the furthest away the shadow is going to be not as harsh as it is when the shadow is really, really close. So it's up here, let's say the mouse, right? There's still a good deal of distance from the top all the way down. So we have to think about how bright or how soft that shadow is going to be. So this part right here is going to be super dark. But here, the light is sort of bouncing everywhere. So that means that the light bouncing everywhere will make the shadow not as dark. So using a soft brush, hopefully you have the shadows on a separate layer. I'll create it, soften, lighten. I'm just going to add just a little bit more light hitting those shadows. Same thing here. Because if you really look, shadows aren't 100% black. You know, there's some complexity to it. And it's not just like a hard shadow. Like maybe the shadow from the book here is going to be harder since it's closer to the light source. Compared to, let's say, the shadow down here is probably going to have a softer edge to it. Start by your layer. Just a little bit softer compared to the one closest to your main light source. Same thing for him. His shadow is pretty much the same distance as the table's shadow here. And another thing that you can do to separate something is to, if you're going to include the line art, is to push back the line art that's going furthest away, sort of like ambient, not ambient occlusion. I'm blanking out, but atmospheric perspective. Kind of like atmospheric perspective, the further back it is, excuse me, the lighter something appears because of the atmosphere, right? Or the fuzzier it is, depending on like the time of day. But let's say you have the line, you're gonna keep the liner on the mouse. Keep them black, really, really good. I say go for it. But then for the background here, take a brand new layer, choose lighten, and take the surrounding values and sort of just push the dark outline back. And easily achieved using the lighten blend mode. So the lighten blend mode will target the dark parts and leave the lighter values alone. So it will replace the dark values with lighter values. Like so. Oh, just by revealing that, there's so much more happening in here. Since it's on a separate layer, you can lower the opacity on it. You can choose darker values of gray to kind of push that out. Alright, so let's merge this together. So already we made such a huge difference because now you have off, everything is a little bit graphic, the shadows are really, really hard. There's not really variety in terms of values and contrast in there. Well, there's contrast because it's dark and then there's light. But now we're adding just a little bit more complexity to it. You push that background back using a lighten layer so that the line art is not black anymore. And see how that flower almost just stands out a little bit stronger compared to the dark black outline for things in the foreground. So you really want to think about depth here and how to basically showcase it. And since you're using a line which heavies like a form, you have to use some kind of atmospheric thing to add more depth to it. That's pretty much it. That's just keep working at it, keep adding to the values, and make sure that there's a bit of variety in there. Otherwise, very good composition. I really love your character. If you have more time, push the rendering. Look at some of the rendering demos that I posted, and just phase out maybe the main character's line art. Because for the next assignment, guys, I want you to not have line art in your portraits. I want you guys to keep them fairly rendered, like a rendered form, and showcase it by using the light and shadows. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Till the next video. Alright, thanks so much, Jonathan. Thanks, everybody.